Events to look out for, not only in Nigeria, but across the globe.
No provision for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone.
Political issues, foreign affairs.
I will protect Social Security and Medicare for our great seniors. They deserve it.
Business reports, sporting events.
Gallo for Garnacho! Oh wow! Oh wow! That is one of the great goals!
Entertainment updates and many more. All on Midas Radio 90.5 FM. Unrivaled information. Fresh, factual, accurate, unbiased, concise, balanced on Midas Radio News. It's time to bring you stories that matter.
It's 1 o'clock. Good afternoon. I am Esther Isah with Beyond Nigeria on Midas Radio 90.5 FM, broadcasting live from Ado Ekiti. Here are the top stories. Court adjourns Malami son's trial as Attorney General takes over prosecution. Iranians bid late Supreme Leader Khamenei farewell. A Japanese court upholds order to dissolve church over exploitation charges. Now the news in detail. The Federal High Court in Abuja has adjourned the alleged terrorism trial of former Attorney General of the Federation Abubakar Malami and his son Abdulaziz till March 10, 2026. The adjournment followed an application by the Director of Public Prosecutions of the Federation, Rotimi Oyedepo, who said the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Lateef Fagbemi, had taken over the prosecution and needs more time to study the case file. Oyedepo informed the court that the matter was recently transferred from the Department of State Services to the Department of Public Prosecutions, necessitating time to familiarize the AGF with the facts and make a well-informed decision. While Malami's counsel, Ifedayo did not oppose the application for adjournment, he however urged the court to strike out the case if the prosecution fails to commence trial on the next adjourned date, alleging a lack of diligent prosecution. Beyond Nigeria, a Tunisian court has jailed the country's richest businessman, Marwan Mabrouk, for corruption, while it handed prison terms to a former prime minister and several other former cabinet members for their handling of the case. Mabrouk, a son-in-law of Tunisia's former president Zine Ben Ali, has been held in prison since 2023 on charges of money laundering, stealing funds from state companies, and obtaining illegal benefits from former Prime Minister Youssef Chahet's government. Chahed, along with the former Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, Human Rights Minister, as well as the Information and Communication Technologies Minister, were each sentenced to 6 years in prison. Away from Africa, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has agreed to appear and testify before a congressional panel investigating the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, made the announcement, although noting that the Commerce Secretary has not been accused of any wrongdoing by Epstein's victims. The Commerce Secretary had previously told Congress he cut ties with Epstein in 2005 after he used sexual innuendo to explain why he owned a massage table in a room of his home. The announcement comes days after former U.S. President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, both testified in the inquiry. Away from that, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has described the ongoing conflict in the Middle East as a failure of the international order, saying the United States had not consulted its allies before launching a strike on Iran. Speaking during a visit to Australia, Carney said the current conflict is an example of the undoing of the international order despite decades of UN Security Council resolutions and several diplomatic frameworks. The Canadian Prime Minister called for calm and a rapid de-escalation of hostilities, expressing his country's readiness to assist in achieving the goal. U.S. and the Israeli forces launched strikes against Iran on Saturday after negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program stalled. In the meantime, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has refuted U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to end trade with Spain, declaring his opposition to what he called the breakdown of international law in regards to the Iran war. In a televised address, Sanchez reflected on the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, as well as the Iraq war more than 20 years ago, adding that his government's position remained one that said no to wars. Asserting that one illegality could not be met with another, Sanchez said the government was studying economic measures to counter the impact of the conflict of Spaniards. Recall that Trump had threatened to impose a full trade embargo on Spain in response to its refusal to allow the U.S. to use the jointly run military bases for strikes on Iran. Meanwhile, Iranians will bid farewell to late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei at a ceremony in Tehran later today. Speaking to newsmen, head of Iran's Islamic Propagation Council, Hojjatul Islam Mahmoudi, said the farewell ceremony would continue for 3 days and the funeral procession will be announced later. Mahmoudi said the public will be able to pay their respects to the body of the late Supreme Leader at a prayer hall which would be receiving visitors. 86-year-old Khamenei was killed last weekend in airstrikes by Israel and the United States. You are still listening to Beyond Nigeria on Midas Radio 90.5 FM, Ado Ekiti.
Remember to protect the land of honor and integrity. Please visit www.midasradio905.fm for more information, and you can follow us across our social media platforms at Midas Radio 905 for regular updates. You can also download our app on Apple or Play Store for convenient access and your listening pleasure. Midas Radio cares about you, and we are committed to bringing you stories that matter.
Thanks for staying with us. Moving on to the rest of the news. The government of the United Kingdom has said it will stop issuing study visas to people from Afghanistan, Cameroon, Myanmar, and Sudan from this month. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood also said the Home Office will stop issuing skilled work visas to Afghans, citing widespread visa abuse as its reasons. Mahmood said official figures showed that people from the 4 countries were the most likely to make an asylum claim after originally coming to the UK to study, adding that the UK needed to maintain its ability and proud tradition of helping those genuinely in need. In its release, the government said asylum claims from people who had originally traveled to the UK legally to study had increased drastically between 2021 and 2025. On the Asian continent, Philippine lawmakers have ordered Vice President Sara Duterte to respond to impeachment complaints against her over allegations involving unexplained wealth, misuse of public funds, and making public threats against President Ferdinand Marcos. The vote in the House of Representatives Justice Committee comes amid a bitter falling out between the two leaders who swept to power in 2022 before becoming rivals. The complaints against the vice president, who is daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, include the misuse of confidential funds, bribery, and unexplained wealth, and publicly threatening to have Marcos killed along with his wife and a cousin who was House Speaker at the time. The daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte is seen as a frontrunner for the 2028 presidential election and has said she would run for the top post. Meanwhile, a Japanese court has upheld an order to dissolve the controversial Unification Church after Japan's Education and Culture Ministry accused it of manipulating followers into making huge donations. The church came under scrutiny after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in 2022, when the man who shot him said he held a grudge against the Prime Minister because of his ties with the Unification Church, which had bankrupted his family. In the wake of Abe's death, investigations into the Unification Church revealed close ties with many conservative lawmakers and also revealed that the church coerced followers into buying expensive items by exploiting fears about their spiritual well-being. While the church appealed an earlier ruling that stripped the church of its tax-exempt status and required it to liquidate its assets, today's ruling at the Tokyo High Court denied the appeal and rejected its argument that the donations were part of legitimate religious activities. According to the first ruling by the Tokyo District Court, the Unification Church had taken about $130 million from more than 1,500 persons. Finally, the Sri Lankan military has rescued at least 30 persons on board a sinking Iranian ship near Sri Lankan waters today. The country's foreign minister, Vihita Hirath, told Parliament that the Sri Lankan Navy dispatched a rescue mission after a distress call from the Iranian ship. While Hirath did not give further details on the rescue, he said Sri Lanka would take appropriate action. According to reports, the injured had been admitted to a hospital in Gale. That's beyond Nigeria this afternoon, but before we go, here is a recap of the major stories. We told you that the Federal High Court in Abuja has adjourned the alleged terrorism trial of former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, and his son till March 10, as the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, takes over the prosecution from the DSS. We informed you that Iranians will bid farewell to late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei at a ceremony in Tehran later today. Finally came a report that a Japanese court has upheld an order to dissolve the controversial Unification Church after Japan's Education and Culture Ministry accused it of manipulating followers into making huge donations. That's beyond Nigeria. As